when a huge crocodile suddenly appeared next to Joe's boat and began strangely circling around him. The experienced fisherman grabbed his paddle, ready to fight back. But instead of attacking, the reptile froze, looking at him with an almost human gaze full of desperation. Deciding to follow this unusual guide into the wildest parts of the swamp, Joe had no idea what awaited him. What he discovered among the impenetrable mangrove thickets left even the police officers who arrived at his call speechless. The foggy morning on the river started as usual. Joe was dozing in his boat, enjoying the silence, when an unexpected movement in the water made him startled. He expected to see anything, but certainly not a huge crocodile staring intently at him. Surprisingly, the reptile showed no aggression. Its eyes conveyed an almost human concern. The crocodile slowly circled around the boat. Its movements weren't predatory, but seemed deliberate. "What's wrong with you?" Joe muttered, watching the predator display strange dog-like loyalty, periodically swimming away and returning, as if inviting him to follow. Joe faced a choice that could cost him his life. Ignore the predator's strange behavior or yield to an irrational impulse and follow it. Intuition battled with common sense. According to all survival rules, following a crocodile was madness. But an inner voice suggested that there was something more to this than mere coincidence. "All right, let's see where you're taking me," Joe decided, carefully starting the engine. The reptile immediately headed upstream, periodically looking back as if checking whether the human was following. They swam through unfamiliar parts of the river, through narrow channels where tree branches scratched the sides of the boat. With each turn, the surrounding nature became wilder and more untouched. Joe felt his pulse quicken, partly from fear, partly from a strange sense of purpose, as if he were moving towards something incredibly important. After half an hour of travel, the crocodile led the boat to a small beach hidden from the main riverbed. Something had clearly happened here. Flattened grass, broken branches, signs of hasty retreat. Jumping ashore, Joe discovered the remains of a destroyed camp, torn backpacks, scattered belongings as if someone had fled in panic. The crocodile remained motionless at the water's edge, watching attentively as Joe investigated the site. Among the scattered items were scientific instruments and an observation journal. Flipping through a few pages, Joe realized he had stumbled upon the campsite of a wildlife researcher studying crocodiles. The last entries broke off mid-sentence as if the author had been interrupted, or someone had interrupted them. The final entry mentioned a disturbing discovery. Strange scars on crocodiles. I suspect human intervention. These are not natural wounds. I think I've stumbled onto a trail. After that, nothing. While Joe was trying to piece together what had happened, a rustling came from behind the bushes. Instinctively grabbing a fishing net as an improvised weapon, he prepared for danger. The crocodile was also on alert, its tail tensely twitching. The path led deep into the forest along a barely visible trail marked by broken branches and signs of struggle. Each step was difficult, his heart pounding somewhere in his throat. At some point, Joe doubted his decision. I should have called for help, but his phone showed no signal. He was cut off from civilization, alone with the wilderness and an unknown danger. The further he went, the more signs of violence he found. Drops of dried blood on leaves, scraps of fabric caught on branches. The crocodile followed him like a guard dog, never falling behind. In their strange alliance, the animal seemed more determined and purposeful than the human. After 20 minutes of pushing through dense undergrowth, they came to a small, makeshift shelter, almost invisible among the vegetation. Joe cautiously approached, his senses heightened to the extreme. Weak sounds came from the shelter. Looking inside, he saw a bound woman in field uniform, unconscious, with bruises and abrasions. Immediately recognizing her from a photo in the journal, Joe rushed to untie the restraints. "Dr. Harris, hang on. I'll get you out of here," he whispered, feverishly working on the knots. The woman slowly regained consciousness, her eyes widening with fear, then surprise. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. "I'm Joe. Your crocodile led me here," he replied, helping her sit up. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by understanding, then admiration. "Charlie, he found help," she whispered with reverent awe. Gathering her strength, Dr. Harris told a shocking story. She had discovered local poachers using crocodiles as drug couriers. implanting waterproof containers with prohibited substances into their bodies. The crocodiles could cross borders and patrol posts where a human would be stopped. They caught me when I was documenting their activities, she explained. Charlie is part of my research. I've been tracking his behavior for over a year. He's special. Joe didn't have time to process this information when rough male voices were heard outside. Where's that damn researcher? Boss said no witnesses. The poachers had returned and they were determined. Joe quickly helped Dr. Harris hide under thick foliage, then took position behind a tree, ready to defend himself. The crocodile unexpectedly slipped into the water and disappeared. Betrayed, Joe thought bitterly, but he had no time to ponder the peculiarities of animal behavior. Two muscular men with rifles were surveying the area, approaching their hiding place. Discovery seemed inevitable. Suddenly, a loud splash came from the river. The poachers turned toward the sound, one of them approaching the shore. "Look at this! It's one of our transporters!" he shouted to his companion. At that moment, the water exploded in a fountain of spray, and huge toothy jaws clamped onto the criminal's leg. His scream was cut short as Charlie dragged him underwater. The second poacher panicked and began shooting at the river, but two more crocodiles surfaced from different directions, as if on command. The ancient predators acted with astonishing coordination, as if executing a well-thought-out attack plan. Taking advantage of the chaos, Joe grabbed Dr. Harris's hand and dragged her to the boat. They reached the shore just as the last poacher disappeared into the forest with a scream, pursued by enraged reptiles. How is this possible? Joe asked breathlessly, starting the engine. Dr. Harris looked at the river with reverential awe. "They're much smarter than we think," she answered simply. "Charlie and his group, they protect their territory, and it seems they consider me theirs too." At the moment the boat left the shore, Charlie surfaced nearby, escorting them with the serene gaze of an ancient creature who had outlived the dinosaurs. In his eyes, Joe no longer saw fear or pleading, only the calm dignity of a river guardian who had fulfilled his duty. A week after these events, the police arrested the entire smuggling syndicate. The evidence collected by Dr. Harris proved decisive in the trial. It turned out that the poachers had used more than 30 animals, implanting containers with drugs under their skin and forcing them to cross the border where patrols couldn't detect the illegal cargo. Joe often visited the research station where Dr. Harris continued her work. Sometimes they went out in a boat together, and Charlie always appeared, as if greeting old friends. The story of Joe, Dr. Harris, and a crocodile named Charlie became legend among local fishermen. Now, seeing a crocodile looking intently at their boat, they don't rush to flee. Who knows, perhaps the ancient guardian of the river simply wants to tell them something important.